Welcome to Testing in the Pub.
Welcome to another Testing in the Pub session. This time we've got two guests, the co-organisers of Weekend Testing. We've got Neil Studd and Amy Phillips.
Hi.
Hi. That's
Welcome.
Weekend Testing Europe. We should.
Weekend Testing
Don't
Europe.
want to cut the other guys out. There's lots of people out there.
Oh yeah, we are going to ask.
Weekend
We're
We are
going to
going
ask
to
about
ask
that,
you.
aren't we? Yeah.
Soon, so.
Chapters. Is it weekend testing
Chapters.
chapters? Is that what they're called?
Yeah, chapters. Yeah.
We'll also call them meetups chapters as well. It's kind of,
Isn't that what the Hell's Angels have or something?
I don't know. Anyway,
We just took it over. We didn't name it.
so
Moving swiftly on.
let's start with a brief intro to yourselves first before Weekend Testing Europe.
I'm Neil Studd. I've been testing in the UK for about 10 years now, straight out of university where I graduated as a journalist. So obviously that's a really obvious career path into testing, you know.
Very relevant.
But I fell into it like a lot of people do and have been loving it ever since. Only really discovered there was a wider community maybe a year or so ago. At the start of the year I did a rapid testing online course with James Back, and he was quite impressed with what I was doing and he was reviewing it and praising it. And at the end of the course he said, "Why did nobody know who you are? Why has your name never been spoken by the tongues of men?" So my 2014 mission has been to change that, has been to voice myself more than I have done before. And as we'll find out in Weekend Testing, that's kind of been a launch pad for what I've been up to.
Excellent.
That's cool.
And I'm Amy Phillips, returning guest.
You are the first returning
First
guest.
returning
testing
guest,
in the
yeah, I
pub.
like
How does that
Really
make
proud,
you feel?
Yeah.
Is the right answer.
Where's your
obviously
t-shirt?
It's a great honour. I haven't been given one. I'm sure I earned one at some point.
We want to one.
Yeah, I'm Amy Phillips. I am test lead at Songkick, based in London. Been testing for about 10 years or so now. But yeah, just generally getting involved in community and things like that. So yeah.
Nice.
You cut out the last one.
We're actually.
What have I said last time?
It's worth saying that we're recording in the Songkick office, and
Yes.
it's pretty cool. I like this office.
It is.
There's a
It
disco
is.
ball in the corner.
Yes. And a
There is.
flag. You're ignoring the flag.
And the flag and the
that's
table
true.
tennis.
Sub into Glastonbury.
Okay, that's good intros. Let's talk about Weekend Testing Europe then. So what is it?
Now, Weekend Testing is an online platform for testers to come together in their spare time at weekends, funnily enough, and to meet other testers, participate in testing exercises, and learn new techniques and share your techniques that you already know with other people.
It's peer-to-peer. I think that's the key thing for me. Is it's not someone telling you, like lecturing you or giving talks and things like that. It's the idea is everybody comes together and explores a topic and debates things. I think some of our sessions have been quite like sort of redirected by an attendee suddenly having a great knowledge more than us on the topic. So that's been really good. But yeah, it's basically just a chance to come together and practice. I think a lot of people complain, don't they, that at work they don't get the opportunity to try out new tools or test in the way they necessarily want to test in. So I think Weekend Testing gives you the chance to actually come out and like play around with these things.
Yeah, if you're anything like me, then during the day you're buzzing away at work, you get home and you just want to sleep.
Yep.
We're trying to take advantage of the fact that at weekends you're more prone to having some downtime and a couple of hours spent learning about something you've never seen before, or telling other people about something that actually you already know quite a bit about can be quite rewarding.
Yeah.
So did you guys start weekend testing in Europe, or was it something that you restarted?
Well, it was first started, and the whole weekend testing movement, if I guess you can call it that, started in India, in Bangalore, back in 2009. And from there, various chapters sprung up around the world. There's an Australian, New Zealand one, an America's one, and
This is weeknight testing as well,
yes,
which
yes.
hasn't been in action for a
It's been-
while,
been
but
a-
it does still exist.
Weeknight testing used to be something that was based in the UK as well.
That's right, yeah.
Is it linked in any way to weekend testing?
yeah, it's
Yeah.
part of this under the same umbrella.
Same-
Yeah, I
I
think it's for
Tony
people who are
Brace's
busy at the
umbrella.
weekends, and they prefer the evenings.
Basically, any day of the week, if you want some testing.
So the European session was first started in 2010, and it was run by Anna Back and Marcus Gartner for a while. Then it stopped as both Anna and Marcus had other commitments, which is totally understandable. And we didn't hear about it until we were at Let's Test this year in Stockholm. And Alessandra Moreira was giving a talk about how to raise the testing bar. And she was giving an explanation of how she got involved in facilitating the Australia and New Zealand chapter of weekend testing. And in one of those rare moments that happens from time to time on Twitter, I tweeted during the presentation, I said, it's funny how we don't have one of these in Europe, just off the cuff. And by the end of the session, I had replies with the complete history of weekend testing, who'd been involved, other people had taken care of finding out why it had stopped, and clearly there was some demand to get it started again. So what had started with me tweeting, I'd quite like to be involved in that, turned a week later into, well, I guess the rebirth.
Yeah, well, I think I came a bit afterwards, like it was a few weeks after Let's Test, and I think Ali mentioned in her talk that like we had one in Europe, but it wasn't currently active, and I thought, oh, it's such a shame, peer-to-peer testing, great learning and all this. So I emailed Anna afterwards and said, oh, it would be great to get this going. She was like, it's lucky, Neil's already started doing this, you should just talk. But then even more bizarre, so this all kicked off in Stockholm, and so we started emailing, didn't we? And we were like, oh, we should, so. It turns out we live about 200 metres away from each other.
Yeah, we knew we were.
Like seriously,
And you never knew?
We never knew.
I knew we were both in the same city. I knew that much. But then when we started drilling down and going, where should we meet? And I was like, do you know that park? Yes, I look over it. Well, I'm over the other side of it.
So it's quite convenient, isn't it? It's like a 5-minute walk. So
that makes it really handy then.
Yeah, I mean, so if one of us loses internet for some reason during a session, which has yet to happen, touch wood, we can literally run to the other person's house and carry on.
That'll be a 5-minute
You mean you guys don't do it from the corner pub? do you don't run it from there?
Oh, should.
Definitely, that's what
Testing from the pub.
Yeah. So it feels a bit strange
Weekend
because it's
testing
like
in the pub?
Europe, like the Europe chapter,
Although
but
it's
it's all
trademarked.
running from a small part of Peterborough. So
It's fairly local.
That's pretty cool. So, okay, we've touched on it, but what is the difference between weekend testing Europe and other continents? Is it more different dynamics, for example?
I think one of the big things that we can take advantage of is actually our geographic position, insofar as the European sessions are scheduled well for people west of us. So the Americas, it's kind of breakfast times. That's a lot to ask on a Sunday morning, but we do have people from America turn up. It's late afternoon, early evening in India, so we're getting a lot of people coming in from there, as well as the European people. So we're well placed to make sure we can get a lot of people.
Yeah, but I think the difference between the chapters is just you have different facilitators running the different chapters. So obviously some of them are running slightly different styles or topics differ. Otherwise, it's just really the time.
Yeah.
Like we were in, was it the Australia and New Zealand chapter we joined? And it was fantastic, but it did start at 5 a.m. on a Saturday morning, which was really early.
That's dedication to testing, if ever I've heard it.
So it's more like the different chapters more just give you the options of different times over the weekend.
But it's similar products that you would test.
Yeah,
similar,
absolutely.
Yeah. We actually
similar
try
types of testers.
Yeah, we try and stick to a similar sort of dialogues. I mean, we're even if we're not in the other chapter sessions, we know what they're up to, so we'll try not to do anything too soon after they've done the same thing, so it doesn't look like we're retreading the same ground.
And they do feed off each other. Like we had somebody, I can't remember who.
I'll tell you in a second.
Thank you.
What
Neil's
are you talking about?
Neil's like the information. Like, I'm just
what
like
you
the
need to
whimsical stories. We had someone in our first session, and she was actually running the Australia New Zealand session chapter the weekend after, and she actually enjoyed the session but didn't feel she got to drill down enough, so she actually used that as the theme. So they kind of feed off each other. And
Jean-Anne Harrison.
Yes.
See,
Yeah.
knowledge.
Yeah,
There you go.
I'm a bit of a trivia guy.
But it's interesting that you touched on time, because some people from speaking to the community, the time that it's at on the Sunday is a little bit difficult, because it's kind of like that early evening sort of phase, but they feel as if it was later, then they would be able to attend more. Do you think that that's something that's going to be flexible in the future, where you might modify the time to be later?
Well, I think we'd like to. I mean, we did have a survey before we launched,
Yep.
well, relaunched, I should say, because again, we were like, when do people want to do this? And Sunday afternoons were the most popular sort of time that most people could make. But I think if enough people came together and said, like, could we alternatively have it at this time, like, even if it was just occasionally or something like that, then yeah, we're certainly flexible. Like, I mean, our planning is much more like us getting our calendars out and going,
Yeah.
oh, we're out for lunch that day. Hang on, how are we going to work that? You know, everybody has a life, and it has to.
Yeah.
It does fit around that.
Yeah, I've got no idea how much effort's involved in for you guys to run this, but maybe having like the same session, like just at a separate time for people that couldn't make that.
Friday morning twice or something. It could work.
It could work. I think it's just like knowing when that time is. I think
Yeah,
if
of
people,
course.
you know, we should perhaps put something on Twitter. Like, if people are able, if we have like, because I think you need like, I mean, it's good if you've got sort of 4 or 5 people, because it's peer to peer. So
Yeah.
you know, you don't just want a one-on-one really.
Yeah.
But I think if we had sort of 4 or 5 people who there was another time that worked for them, then we could certainly put something together.
Yeah, we're not particularly precious about it.
No, not at all.
That's cool.
Mm.
Okay, so what does a weekend testing session actually look like?
We kind of stick to a rough outline. We normally have a 2-hour session, which will kick off with introductions, a quick overview of what the planned exercise is for the day, if we're themed around an exercise, and a bit of discussion about what we already know up front about that, so we can discuss what our preconceptions are, things, and actually that really helps us to establish the learning level of the group, because before you start, you've got no idea whether everyone is new to this topic and you need to take baby steps, or whether everyone already really knows what you're talking about and they want to go really deep on something. So we'll spend 20 minutes discussing how much do we already know about this, how do we think that might help us with what's coming up. We'll then dive into an exercise, which is normally the middle half of the session, so about an hour of exercise normally. And then we'll debrief that afterwards and discuss not just the exercise, but what we've learnt and where we take our learning of this from here.
And the exercise is usually like a hands-on, I mean, well, most of them so far have been hands-on sort of testing, but sometimes they are, like in some of the other chapters, it's like test planning or something along those lines, but it's hands-on, so let's try something else.
How do you decide what the exercises are going to be?
Well, I know what I usually use to decide on what we have a great long list of all the things that we think
have an
would
actual
work.
backlog. Yeah.
We do have a backlog, and we decide before each one. We try and work out what would be suitable. As Neil mentioned earlier, we try not to do something which one of the other chapters has quite recently covered, so that you can, you know, if you're not interested in, say, security, you're not suddenly finding all the weekend testing options are security based. So we try and spread that. We quite like to choose something which is like a useful tool but not necessarily widely known, because I think it's quite nice to discover new tools or sites or things that might be useful in your day-to-day life. But I know after that, my personal preference is on things which I know I want to learn more about, because you just learn so much from what everybody, like what they know already and what you find out and discuss as a group. So that's usually what I used to weigh in on. It was like, I would really like to know more about test reporting. Let's have a session.
As we said at the beginning, we're facilitators more than we are presenters. So actually, we benefit from having the people around us in the group, and we'll be asking them to feed the session. I mean, we're there to make sure the session runs to a schedule and to try and stick to a rough dialogue, but to stick to a narrative.
Yeah.
But it's the people there that drive what happens in the session.
It's quite interesting with the topics that you choose. Do you think you would ever tie it in with like charities, with charity software, so that we're helping someone out with their specific software, or?
Well, we've certainly, I mean, like, it's certainly been an option. We haven't gone there yet, because obviously we're going quite small steps. We're doing the sessions that are generally easy to organise, like, but there is an option for getting in companies who have products that could do with some testing and having a sort of, you know, a test session around that, could work with charities, anything like that. I mean, it's a little bit more coordination, because of course you may not necessarily have live versions of the product, like, because obviously the sessions we've done so far, it's been, this is on the web, let's go. And also it would be quite nice, you sort of want involvement, like it'd be good to have a developer there. So we've certainly discussed it, but we haven't got anything.
It's been done
yet.
previously in other weekend testing sessions,
Yes.
and we certainly have a desire to do that again. I've seen it work really well. Dan, I know you were with in a Black Ops testing webinar this week that I was in.
Oh yeah,
Where,
that's right.
Did you go?
half-
I was on a
half-
plane.
So halfway through the chat, one of the developers of the application under test, GeoGebra, actually popped up in the chat.
Yeah, I saw that.
Started posting links to bugs that he just raised on the back of the session.
Brilliant.
And
I think some of that's
It was
really
pretty
cool.
cool.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
pretty cool.
It's just there's a little bit more coordination. So I think
Yeah,
we'll
of course.
definitely do it, but
Yeah.
we think we're finding our feet still.
yeah, it's up to us
Yeah.
to find our way.
Do you think there's any restrictions on what software you use, like mobile apps, for example, where
Well, I think it's down to setup. Like, we try to avoid things which require, which are not necessarily available on lots of platforms, or things that require a large, download or a big install or something like that, just because
web-based?
you can't really expect everybody to be prepped before the session. So we don't want to use most of the session getting everybody up and running.
Yeah, the thing we're trying to avoid is burning too much of the session being like a tech support person.
Yeah.
And saying you can't
Yeah.
install. I mean, I've seen other sessions from other chapters where that's really impacted on what they were doing.
Yeah.
It's not to say we won't, and particularly with something like mobile, the diversity can work in our favour if we can find something that works on enough different platforms. You're bound to cover a number of different ones
That's right. Yeah.
within the group.
Yeah, you just need to find something that's live and therefore is easily installable.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's things like that, really. Like, it's just how, given that everybody's at an unknown location around the world with an unknown internet connection, how well is this going to work for 2 hours? It sounds like it's one of those funny things. 2 hours sounds quite a lot of your weekend. Like, before you start, you're like, I can't believe 2 hours of my weekend testing. But once you get going on the session, it goes so quickly.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable, isn't it?
The way we normally do it, one of us is normally taking care of the admin side
Yeah.
of the session.
Right.
We switch each time, and the other person is more involved and more heads up.
Yeah.
And I was the administrative person for the very first session we did, and there was a huge turnout for that. It was obviously a lot of interest in the relaunch. So there was, I think it was 27 people at the most. When normally we're more like 10. And
Wow.
we got to the end of the first session. I just had to ask Amy, how did that go? Because I actually don't know. I feel like we
went really
did
well.
what we want.
Yeah. I was on
Yeah.
that one. It went really well. But one thing, leads to another question. Because it's all run through Skype, the more people, the more difficult it's going to be, right, with the conversations, because everybody's trying to converse in the same thread. So
that's right. Well, we try. I think if we have large numbers of people, we try and split them up. Groups of sort of 5-ish is quite a nice size for discussion. So certainly in the first one we had four groups. Is that the only one we split people up? I think it was.
So. Yeah. Well,
The others,
people are paired up sometimes
that's
to
right.
do things.
Yeah. Sometimes people. Yeah, that's right. We have. But yeah, I think obviously that's kind of one of the things with the session. You have to just play it by ear. Like, we don't know who's coming really. So if we have lots of people, we try and create group discussions. If we don't, then we tend not to. So.
that's cool. That's cool.
Do you find you have people who dial in and just listen?
Well, I think we have some people. There's no.
They're certainly in the minority.
Yeah, but there's no pressure to join in. Like, I think it would be absolutely no trouble to just join it. Like, we've had people. I think it was mostly in the first session. Some people watching the F1.
You can hear it in the background.
Well, actually, no. I should say actually, this is all typing on Skype, so it does work quite well if people have got kids. And they can't make a lot of noise, or if they are watching something, then people do tend to, like just sort of keep an eye on and join in discussions and things. But I mean, there's no pressure to join in. You can just do what you want.
I think in a way you'll be missing out if you didn't, because the whole point is it's a group of people getting together to discuss similar interests. And if you wanted to weigh in or ask for something to be clarified, then the group is there for you to do that.
That's right.
But certainly if you're either new to testing or you're a bit unsure and you're trying to find your feet, then certainly come along, and you don't have to say anything. It would probably help actually if you told us that you're just listening in, because one of the things we'll try and do actually is make sure we include everyone during the session. So if we start nagging you and saying, come on,
What do you think,
Joe, tell us what's going on, and
Yeah.
overwhelm.
Yeah, I guess it's like a lot of things. You're going to get out more if you put more in. But it's good to hear that as an absolute beginner, you are welcomed into.
Everyone's welcome.
We had someone in our most recent session in October who said they'd been testing, I think, for 19 days, and they decided to come on to weekend testing. How their career found them to weekend testing in 19 days? It took me 9.5 years.
How awesome is that? Though?
Yeah,
After
really
19 days, they're doing stuff like that.
Yeah.
It kind of shows how far things have come as well, particularly with Twitter. I mean,
Yeah.
once you
That's right.
get on there and you find the right people, there's opportunities there for you.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, in that sense, there is no knowledge prerequisites, right?
No, not at all, not at all. Like, I mean, there are topics which even we know relatively little about.
Yeah.
It really, I mean, we'll have enough to, the idea is we come together and we discuss something together, and we'll perhaps have other things to read, people share articles or blog posts or videos or things like that. And then we will try and test something together, and hopefully we will learn things. So yeah, anybody come, I mean, you don't even have to be a tester. I'm trying to encourage some developers I know who have an interest in test, but maybe don't necessarily get it. I'm saying, come along, you know, anyone can join us and see what it's like actually getting stuck in.
The way we shape the sessions, we have obviously there's an application under test normally, but also there's a theme running underneath that. So, for example, we did a session where we were using Evernote, which some people use, some people haven't, and it was themed around communication and how you can communicate to the powers that be, how your testing's going. So even if you're new to testing, but you're familiar with Evernote, then I mean, that gives you a way that you can start with something you know, and then you can learn communication. Or if you're an old hand but Evernote's new to you, or you're not sure how to use a particular test technique, you can come along and learn that side of things.
Yeah, so you're gonna learn a new skill, or you're gonna learn something new.
Yeah, everybody learns something. I mean, sometimes it's about biscuits or things. You know, like can't guarantee all the sessions stay directly on track, but you're guaranteed to learn something. Yeah.
Generally, we'll let the conversation flow, and let it sort of follow the energy.
Yeah.
So whatever people are doing during the session that's interesting, we'll go with that. We have various kinds of checkpoints that we try and hit along the way to make sure that we're certainly in terms of timekeeping and making sure that we draw things to a satisfactory conclusion. But there's sessions at the start that we don't know how they're going to end necessarily.
We have no idea, because we really have no
find.
idea who's coming, and we have no idea what backgrounds they have or what experience they have. So yeah, it's quite exciting, isn't it? Like, anything can happen. I think is what we generally think.
When I first blogged about it, I think I said that it was a bit like an improv show, like Whose Line Is It Anyway, or something, where we are the presenters, and we have a guiding hand, but it's up to the people in the middle who shape what happens.
Yeah, it's a good
very
analogy.
good. Improv acting as the product owner.
Yes, I apologise for the record for telling you to shut up and telling you that I was playing a character. It was not me.
It's quite funny. I went away for a while and then I came back. I just tried to pitch in.
You went, hello, here's my test feedback. Shut up, Dan.
That was good. I like that. That was good. Very realistic.
Yes, sadly the voice of experience.
So how frequently does weekend testing happen?
The European sessions are run once a month, and we generally try and aim for the third weekend of the month. The reason being that there are these other chapters around the world, and we each tend to have our own weekend slot, so that roughly speaking, there's something happening somewhere around the world each weekend. But again, we're flexible. We sometimes overlap, we sometimes don't. But the place to go to find out is to look on weekendtesting.com, where you'll find on the homepage a list of all the upcoming and recent sessions with reports of how they went. Our Twitter account is Europe Testers, and if you want to come to contact us on email, it's europetesters@gmail.com. We have a lightweight mailing list in that it's a Gmail account that Amy and I control. We won't spam you with anything because it's too much effort on our part. But if you're fed up with hearing from us, just reply and we'll take you off. We won't suddenly sign you up for 10 more mailing lists. It's fairly lightweight. We just use it to let people know what's going on.
Yeah, and we use that. Like, we're trying to get better about emailing people out, like sessions coming up, and we often know which day we're going to do the session, but don't have the session details. So we're trying to do a bit more on save the date to help people sort of schedule things into their life. But yeah, generally we're aiming for the third weekend of the month.
So there's just been one then? Is that right?
There was just one this weekend Sunday, gone, yeah. We had a special guest speaker in with us this month. We had Dan Billing, another graduate of Testing in the Pub, who was giving a really, really interesting and energetic primer on security testing. It's kind of the first time we've had a guest speaker in since we started doing it, and it's a format we'll certainly revisit. because having a focal point for the session, someone who people can throw questions at. Obviously, it's as interesting and challenging for Dan as it is for us, because there's a lot of pressure on him, but he absolutely excelled. He would certainly seems to want to do it again. The attendees would like a follow-up, deeper dive into some security testing tools, and I think security testing is something we're going to revisit in the future.
And I think it works really well for that sort of topics like that. Like, it would be great to do something on performance, or the sort of testing which everybody considers to be a little bit more specialist than just day-to-day feature testing or website testing or something like that. Yeah. So.
Our list of our plans is huge.
We've got years.
Given that we present once a month, we've got at least a year and a half's worth of material there.
Excellent.
One thing I'd really like to do sometime, which is on our backlog, is to have almost like a show and tell session. So have people come along and say, what are the tools that you enjoy using?
Yes.
Give each person in the group, depending on how many people are there, 5 or 10 minutes to say, here's a tool I use, this is why it's good, this is how it makes my life easier. And then you throw enough of those at the group, and someone's going to come away with 3 or 4 brand new things that they can actually just take away and use.
Yeah, and books as well. I think it'd be really interesting to get everybody to name their what's their top testing book, because there's obviously a few which everybody knows they have to read, but beyond that, you discover all sorts of gems, don't you?
What's your top testing books?
Inevitable question.
Ooh.
Put you on the spot now, eh?
Well, do you know, that's a really interesting question, because I think the book I go back to every time is obviously the lessons learned in software testing. There's nothing, if you just dip into that every 6 months, you go, oh, I'd forgotten about that, so that's brilliant. But actually, I think for me, the sort of oh wow book at the moment anyway was the Leprechauns of Software Engineering, just because it was such an incredible dive into so many of the things that just get bandied about every day, and you hear them every day. Once you read the book, and you're like, no, that's not true. It's fascinating.
It's like
it really
decoding the
just,
matrix.
You
begin to spot the patterns.
I think it just changes the way you look at all these things. I think there's so many people they're being pushed on to deliver metrics and do all these because of these myths, and actually you see all the evidence behind it. It's like, this isn't true.
I saw him speak. I think it was at Eurostar last year.
Yeah,
that was it. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah. Actually, I was having like one of those oh wow, starstruck moments, because I'd literally finished reading the book on the flight over there and not realised he was speaking, and then he got up and spoke, and I was sitting next to Richard, friendly tester, and I was literally going, Richard. He was kind of ignoring me.
My list of things that I want to read is longer than the things I have read. Recently, I've particularly enjoyed Elizabeth Hendrickson's Explore It book.
I really like that
one.
Book,
yes.
I was reading it earlier today. In fact, that's the one I keep going back to.
It's the sort of book that shows that exploratory testing isn't just a lesser class of testing. It's actually something we all do at all times. And actually, if we can start to talk about that with some degree of, if we can frame around that what we're actually doing, we can make our testing better.
Good choice.
I'm reading quite a lot of philosophical books at the moment. So I'm reading David McCraney's "You Are Not So Smart."
That's a good book.
I've read that. I really like
the various follow-on books on the back of that.
The podcast.
I just discovered the podcast.
Yeah.
I've got 2 of those on my phone at the moment.
Yeah.
So
But be careful if you are on a diet, because at the end of each podcast he does a thing with a cookie, and it is awful, because he goes every episode he gets a reader sends in a recipe for a cookie, and they bake the cookie, and he goes, okay, I've got this cookie, it's like double chocolate with all this stuff, okay, I'm going to eat the cookie. Oh my god, it's amazing! And if you're listening to it, you're like, cookie! It's terrible! So listen to it when you're nowhere near cookies.
We've tried to do the same thing with beer.
Beer. So what's your favourite testing book then, Dan?
I would say it's not a testing book, but it's a thinking book, and it's Ed de Bono's Lateral Thinking.
I haven't read that one.
It's good book.
The one I keep coming back to at the moment is Explore It by Elizabeth Hendrickson.
It was a really good book.
It's a really good book. I also go back quite often to Secrets of Consulting and also Perfect Software as well. And in fact, I've got another 4 or 5 of Jerry Weinberg's books that I'm slowly but surely beginning to work my way through. So I find Perfect Software is very good.
I've bought Perfect Software twice this year. Once I read it on the plane on the way out to Let's Test, and I left it in the back of the seat as I got off the plane, and I enjoyed it so much that I actually went back to Lost Property as I left, and no one handed it in. So hopefully someone that's gone to a good home.
You donated that.
Yeah, exactly.
But so someone at Let's Test.
You won't believe what I found on the plane.
The sign.
Cool. So going back to the website, then you've said that you put all the information for upcoming events, but do you also put information there for events that have just happened?
Yeah, that's right. So generally the way we do the website is you'll have a session announcement a week before the event, which hopefully gives you enough of an outline. You'll know the topic. You may have an inkling of the tool, though we try and keep some stuff secret, so it's all exciting. So we try and just give you an outline so you'll know roughly what you're going to get into with the session. Then we'll have the session, and then afterwards, and Neil's really fast at doing this, I'm a little bit slower, we will write up what we have the full transcript from Skype, so even if you're not there, you can follow along, but we also sort of do a summary of what went on in the session, and then we share a whole load of links for additional resources. The security one, which session 50, which just happened, has like the most links in the world. It's like, I've been reading these for 6 months. But yeah, we just try all the things which basically we touch on in the session, but obviously don't go into it in any depth. We try and find some additional resources so you can follow up.
And some of it is because we plan more than we need up front, because you're never sure which direction the session's going to go in. So we've got this pool of resources that it would be silly to throw away. And partly it's so that we can give something back to the people who can't make it, so that they can read an overview of the session. If that sounds interesting, then they can go and read more. So we hope that it's not quite the same as being there, but we hope that some people experience it.
And I think it's also, if you are new to the whole weekend testing thing, it can be quite useful. Like certainly I know before I went to a session, I read quite a few transcripts, and it gives you a feel of what the session's going to be like and who's there. And, you know, it's not like you're not walking into a Skype chat full of super testers, you know, they're the same testers as you know, and I think you get that feel. So hopefully people can sort of duck in and sort of get a feel for it without joining us.
It's cool. If you're talking about resources, you should have a resource page with just all the links to articles that have been mentioned, or links to tools.
Weekend testing website's a little bit challenging, isn't it? Because it's weekend testing, we're just a chapter within it, so we don't have as much freedom on there. Like all the chapters have to kind of come together.
Yeah. Get them to sort it out.
We'll raise a feature request.
You should have seen when we first took control of the European chapter, because I have a bit of OCD about a lot of things. When I first logged into the dashboard for the site, there were something like 33,000 unprocessed spam messages, and I went through and trained the whole lot on Akismet. I went just every single one went that's spam. No, release that one, that's fine. 33,000 messages.
Wow.
It's now
the World Cup was on though.
Yeah,
in honesty.
It's like it's 2 a.m. It's Japan against Croatia. I'm just going to read 25,000 messages about Rolexes.
You know it's a boring match when.
Cool. So tell us about your experiences running it. Actually, how much time and effort does it actually take, or is it really easy? Do you enjoy doing it?
I mean, it does take a little bit of effort. I think we're getting better about like being able to structure the sessions. We now know what you need to absolutely define up front and what we can just work out on the day. Like I think we're getting a bit more confident in our ability to just drive the session. So it's less effort, I'd say, than when we started. It's a few hours per session, perhaps. We obviously come up with a topic. We have to choose a tool and check the sort of platform availability of that tool, and we usually have a play around ourselves, don't we, and just make sure that
we'll do a dry run, because during the session you can't really be there doing the same activity as everyone else, because you're watching to see what they're doing and responding to that. And we get a play beforehand.
We usually try that, and I mean it's twofold. One, because we don't want to miss out. Actually, we'd quite like to test this tool ourselves, but also just to make sure we have a rough idea of, does it look obviously buggy or not, or what do people like, and what are they likely to find on that thing? And then obviously there's the writing all the sessions and like writing the announcements and doing the publicity and stuff. It takes a little bit of time. Then the session itself. So I mean, it's not a huge amount of time. It's more just I think what we are getting better at and what we struggled with at the beginning was there's like a routine. You know that a week before the session you have to have put out your session announcement. You need to be tweeting at certain times and emailing at certain times. So it's more just routine, isn't it?
And now it's more like we're counting down the days until the next one.
We have checklists and things. We're totally on the ball now.
The timekeeping during the session is one of the biggest challenges that I wasn't expecting. I mean, 2 hours sounds like a long time, but when you've got a certain amount of things that you want to get through, it flies by. And I would say that during the session, the things that me and Amy are doing in the private chat most often is just saying, how much more time have we got to work on this? Do we need to move on? Have we got to? Is this flowing well for us?
That's right. Yeah.
So it's just working out when you can pull and loosen the reins.
So in a way, you're almost having those conversations that if you're someone who's run workshops before, you have with yourself in your head.
Exactly.
You're having
It's
those conversations
exactly
between
the same
the two.
thing. Yeah, I think it's really similar to sort of when you do run workshops and things like that. It's you want to be everyone to get something out of it, and you want them to be able to feel like they can discuss things that are relevant to them. But you do have a sort of list of these are the 4 or 5 things we want to get through in this session. You're trying to tick them off, but.
It is a workshop, isn't it? It's just an online
workshop. Exactly. Yeah.
So have you had any feedback from participants to tell you their experiences? Or?
Well, I think the biggest positive I've seen is people returning. So we've had a few people who've come to several of the sessions, which I think is the best thing. You Twitter, and there's been a few blog posts and things of people saying things. I don't think anyone's I don't think we've transformed their lives yet, but I think there's people who commented about learning about tools they haven't heard about before. I think certainly Dan's session on security will have been a big one, because I think that's something that's quite closed, isn't it?
I'd really like to go back to the people who were in that session and find out. I mean, it's security, so you can't ask in too much detail, but I'd really like to know, has this changed how you work? Has this given you any revelations?
That's right.
Because I think there will be some big wins from that one.
Yeah. And I know I've chatted to some of the attendees, and they've really appreciated the fact that they can have a chance to test with testers who are working in more the way they want to work, like more exploratory testing and trying things out, whereas at work in their job they're having to write test plans and log metrics, and they're a bit frustrated by that. So I think there have been people who actually have found that they discovered they do enjoy testing a bit more than perhaps they thought.
Well, one of the things you find is that you keep to yourself sometimes is you think, I don't want to say anything because everyone already knows this.
Yes.
But actually saying that lets people know that you are having the same problem, so it can be cathartic at times. So actually, this is a problem we all face. Let's talk about how we can get around this.
That's right.
So it's problem shared.
To get the best out of a weekend testing session, always make sure that you explain your situation. You kind of bare your soul a bit.
We're all friends.
Yeah, well, I think people are quite good about asking questions as well. I think one thing that's really interesting is obviously people have different names for things, different names for types of testing, and roles is a really challenging one, isn't it? The product manager role we were trying to explain, and it was really, some people had no concept of what this was. Because obviously in their teams they don't have a product manager, so we spent quite a lot of time going, do you have business analysts or project managers? Well, how does it work? You're trying to get an insight. But I think that means hopefully next time they come across a product manager, it's not completely foreign. They're like, okay, I've heard of it at least. So I think
I really enjoy it, but I like tuning in just to see how different people work and different dynamics and just different ways that people think.
Yeah.
So I think that's a key thing that I take away from it as well.
I mean, I've really enjoyed actually having a chance to chat to some of the testers who I previously didn't know of. They're not based in London, so I'm not going to bump into them in the meetups that I go to. They perhaps don't go to the conferences I go to. And Europe's a pretty big place. So actually it's been really good to get a whole list of new names, like you mentioned, completely new testers. It's really nice to actually chat to these people.
In many ways, it's kind of like a lean learning experience, because you don't have the overhead of having to find the money to go to a workshop or a conference and travel to it and get that money from your business. If you can find the time, and we'll see if we can move the times around in the future to help people who can't make it. But if you can spare the time in your weekends, you'd be surprised what you learn.
Yeah,
and that's the key thing, isn't it? This is something that costs you nothing except your time, and you've got the potential to get a hell of a lot out of it.
I have to say, I mean, when I before we started running it, when Anna and Marcus were still running it, I would occasionally see it on Twitter and like in the morning, and it would be like, "Hey, weekend testing's just about to start," and I'd go, "Oh no," and I wouldn't, and I didn't join, and I thought it was like work, you know, where you would just be doing testing, and then since joining, I'm like, no, it's actually really good fun. It's a really good discussion with people who are passionate about testing. So,
conversations, experiments.
Yeah, it's good fun. It's a good laugh. Yeah.
It's a community.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just to finish off then, tell us what the next one's going to be about.
We don't know. We have no idea. That was something we're going to be talking about on the train home tonight.
I think we have some ideas what it might be. One possibility is to do a follow-up on the security testing while the energy's still there.
Possibility, yeah.
Yeah, but we have a long list of applications we'd like to test. We kind of have a sort of a backlog grooming session every couple of months where we'll get together and, because we're so close, and say what we're going to do. We'll plan the next 2 or 3 in advance. It just happens that we're currently in a break between one of those. We know the next one is probably going to be on November the 21st, if that's a Sunday.
The 16th.
16th.
Because
miles off.
The weekend is that's on Saturday.
Of
so
course,
it's
because
the
otherwise,
16th.
it would be Eurostar.
Yeah. So Sunday the 16th will be the next session. Would normally go for 3:30. I mean, we could always ask about on Twitter and see if people want to try an alternative time. If you think, I mean, it's certainly something we should consider. But things we've got roughly in the backlog, we've got a few. We haven't done a session yet, which has been really like just a bug bash type of thing. So that's obviously something would be fun to do in the future. We haven't done any mobile. And we also haven't done anything like kind of a bit more technical, like scripted testing or anything without a GUI, you know, like not a web thing.
Like an API or something.
Yeah. So I think that's an option as well for the future.
Brilliant.
Excellent.
So so weekendtesting.com is where you need to go to find everything.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Amy. Thank you very much, Neil.
Thanks for having us.
And everyone listening to this, get on to the next weekend testing session. You'll learn something. And we'll be back next time with more from Testing in the Pub.